DeleteMe is a privacy service that claims to save you hours of time and effort erasing your personal data so that it can't be found on the internet. But how does it accomplish this? Does it really work? And most importantly, is it worth that high annual fee? Well, I've been testing the service for more than a month now, and this is what I've learned. Welcome to All Things Secure. My name's Josh, and I'm going to start by showing you my initial setup process, the information that I had to give to DeleteMe, and that first report I received from DeleteMe. But make sure you stick around to the end where I'll explain some of the pros and cons of using this kind of privacy service. Okay, one of the first things that you'll see when you click Join Me on the DeleteMe website is that they have 3 different options. Now, it makes sense that if you're a married couple that you would want to have 2 people, and if you want to save a little bit extra money, you can do 2 years. But since this is a business expense, I'm just going to do 1 person for 1 year to show you and myself what this is like. So I'm putting in my email address, you've got your billing information, all of this is just the regular stuff that you need to provide in order to purchase any type of online service. And again, if you wanted to, you could switch to the 2-year plan, pay $50 or add a family member if you needed to as well. So I'm going to skip through here and let's just go ahead and make sure that the payment gets finished. Great, the payment went through and now I'm on my DeleteMe dashboard. This is where I have to go in and add all of my information. And there's a lot of information, so it may feel uncomfortable when you're first doing it, but let me just show you everything that I had to do. So obviously I'm putting in my name. You want to put in alternate names if you have that, maiden names, names that you went by before, or even common misspellings of your name. And then of course you want to add in your birthday because that's another piece of information that's often used to identify you. You can put in your gender, male, female, or otherwise if you want to. And then of course the emails that you use. Your work email, your personal email. You want to put as many of those in as you can. Same with your phone numbers, even past phone numbers, so that way they can find the information that might be floating anywhere on the internet. Okay, the next step is moving into our addresses. Now, this will possibly be difficult for those of you who just have moved around a lot, or very easy for those of you who have stayed in the one spot for decades. But add as many of the addresses as you can, going back a couple decades if you can. So for me, I even put in addresses before I got married and just making sure that I had all of that information that they could use to search and find me anywhere I was. So add all of those and then click Next. Okay, what's great is that this next step is actually really nice because it used to be that they would ask you to upload a copy of your driver's license or some sort of ID, your passport, in order to use that when these sites ask to verify in order to remove your information. Instead, now you can just ask them to send that request to your email address so I never had to upload any of my documents anywhere. The final thing that we're doing here is we are adding in any relatives to make sure that they can find that as well. And now, here we are. Now we're on the dashboard. I'll be honest, one of the things that I was expecting to happen was that I would see like, okay, and now we're starting to search through in some sort of automated process. But that's not what happens with DeleteMe because a lot of this is done manually. The searching is often done manually, and the removal is done manually. And that's one of the reasons why this service tends to be a little more expensive than I would think that it should be. And that's also why it's something that has to be continually done on a quarterly basis for as long as you want to keep your information offline. So I am waiting. I had to wait actually for about 7 days before that first report came to my email, and then I was able to review and look over it. So let's go ahead and take a look at this first report. This first report, like I said, came in about 7 days after I signed up, and it's personalized to me. You can see here that they reviewed over 2,000 records. They had 21 total records removed off of 8 different data brokers and 130 pieces of information that they had found. Now, those numbers really honestly mean nothing to me. What really means something to me is the fact that I saved about 6.5 hours of searching online, which I totally believe that to be true, and about 4 hours of going through and removing that information online. So almost a total of more than 10 hours. When you multiply that by 4, that's 40 hours saved, definitely worth the $130 sign-up fee, annual fee that I had to do. So, I mean, if you look at it from that perspective, it makes a little bit more sense, even if there is a bit of sticker shock when you're first looking at it. At least there was for me. So let's look through the findings. You go through, and if you see a green clean, that means they found none of my information on there. Whereas if there is something like here you see on neighbor who, they found my name, my age, my past address, relative, spouse name, marital status, all of that information, and they requested that it be removed. Now it's going to probably take about 10 days for them to do that. 10 days is actually not a bad time when you compare it to something like this one on the right, free phone tracer, that takes up to 6 weeks. And if you're thinking to yourself, that's ridiculous, why would it take 6 weeks? That's a good question. It should not take 6 weeks, and that's part of what makes this whole industry, this data broker industry, just shady as all get out, because it shouldn't require 6 weeks to remove the data that you request for them to remove. Anyway, you can look through here. I had already gone through and removed my data from Spokio, so I'm glad to know that it's not there anymore. Been verified. PeopleSmart had some of my information, as did Nuber. These places, the thing is these kind of data brokers, they pop up and go away all the time. And that's why they constantly need to be searching for new places. And if you find a place where your data has been found, like I told you earlier, I did find a place online. I was able to submit that to them, and they were able to take it down. So you get through and you get to the end, and basically all I need to know is that in February of 2022, we're going to go through this whole process again. And they're going to look at those same places. They're going to check and make sure that the places that they requested the data removal has actually been removed, and they're going to follow up with them on that. All of this takes time and it takes effort, and I love the fact that DeleteMe just takes care of all of that. And all I'm going to have to worry about is I'm just going to be getting an email once a quarter that says, here is your report, here's all the information that we've taken away. All right, now let's quickly talk about the pros and cons of using a service like DeleteMe. First, on the pros side, I tried doing this data removal request manually on a couple of these different sites, and I can confirm that it is a time-consuming headache. So the service definitely does a good job of making that whole process easier. It also works. As you saw in my initial report, there were a number of sites that had my personal information that are now removing it or have already removed it. And finally, I like being assigned a personal privacy advisor. If I find my personal information somewhere, which I did at some point, I can simply submit the website to them, and they'll not only remove the information, they'll also continue to monitor it to make sure that it stays off the site. Of course, since this isn't an entirely automated process, they do have people working on this manually. That means that DeleteMe ends up costing a little bit more than I would like. Not to mention the weird way that they market their pricing. I mean, if you think about it, it's a quarterly service that's being marketed with a monthly price tag, but you're only given the option to pay on an annual basis. You see what I mean? There's also that issue of trust. In order for them to find and remove your information, you have to give them all of that information in the first place. Granted, I never gave over my ID number, my social security number, or any banking information for them to store and search, but it still requires a high degree of trust in the company itself. Lastly, it seems important to note that this isn't a quick fix solution. It took 7 days to get my report, and then another week or two for all of those sites to remove my information. So if you're in any kind of urgent situation where you're being tracked or bullied, don't expect DeleteMe to provide immediate relief. So overall, I'm really happy with my experience. Could I have manually opted out of all these services myself? Probably, yes, but I value my time almost as much as I value my privacy. So for me, it was worth the expense. In the end, it feels like a luxury service for those who either fear their personal information falling into the wrong hands or they have the disposable income to do something about it. And as somebody who talks about personal privacy and security on this channel, I feel like I definitely fall at least into that former category. If you decide to give DeleteMe a try, use my affiliate link in the description or the comments below. Thanks.